We're going to start today by taking a look at actually doing a drawing. So we already talked about how a line can describe the exterior edges of something called contour line, and we'd use this cup in that exercise. And we talked about the fact that you can vary line quality, thickness, thinness, darkness, lightness, all those things that are able to be done that change any sense of how you interpret, how you read the line. So contour line, varying the line in any way possible for line quality variety. And we talked about doing little sketches known as thumbnail sketches, sort of like study sketches, get to know sketches before you would spend a lot of time on a drawing. So we're going to do a thumbnail sketch today, and I'm just going to give you a couple hints. So the objects that we're going to work with, and they're off camera, but we'll work with this vase because it's an unusual shape, but it's symmetric. I'm just going to work with a pretty common shape, a cylindrical shape, and then we're going to work with another vase that has some variation, a clear glass vase. So those three shapes, they share something in common. They're vertical in terms of their orientation, and they all are symmetric. So we're going to talk about how you would, some little hints to make that work. I'm picking up a 2B pencil, and I'm going to make that, I'm just going to choose a format. Remember, that's what we called that shape that we're going to work on. And this page might have 1, 2, 3, might even have 4 of these if I was doing a full page of thumbnail sketches. But we're going to do one thumbnail sketch. So I set that format box in. I'm going to keep using the 2B. If I was doing this in my own sketchbook and working a sketch, I'd probably work with a 2H. Remember, H is hard. The higher the number, the lighter the line. The harder the graphite, the much lighter line it makes. So 2H makes a light line, 4H would make a really light line. Normally I'd use this because it's easier when I'm setting something up to use a light line, erase what I don't need, clarify what I want using any variety of the darker pencils. We're using a 2B, which is, B is soft, so this is a somewhat soft, it'll be a darker line, because I want you to be able to see it in the video. So once again, let's take a look at this object. This is what I'm going to be working with. I'm going to put it back off camera in the kind of view that you would normally be seeing something. That object is vertical. It is symmetrical. Rather than starting to try to draw the outline, the contour of it, the first thing I would do is I'd look and say, okay, I want it's placed about here in my drawing, and I'm going to make, okay, I'll make these lines darker. My tendency is to make them light because we're going to erase a lot. I'll make them darker so that they're visible. The other thing I would do first is I'm going to look and say, okay, I can see that there is, and I'm going to just lightly indicate where the corner of this table that is going to be the edge of the plane that's holding this vase, and we'll put some other things down. So the vase gets a vertical axis, and I'm going to use that vertical axis to help me keep everything balanced and straight. When I look at the angle I'm seeing the vase, if we were looking at it straight from the top, it's a circle. But the more our viewing angle moves down towards level with it, you can see that most of the time what you're going to get is some kind of an ellipse. So a stretched circle. From my view, I'm slightly up. I'm probably again about a 40-45 degree angle. So I'm going to look at that and I'm going to say, okay, I see that the top of it is an ellipse. And I try to sort of center that ellipse. Then I come right below, because this one happens, I look at it, and it happens to have a lip on the top, so I try to put a very similar elliptical shape right under it. And then I look and I say it comes down at that, about that same width, and then all of a sudden I see that it gets much bigger. So I'm going to make a much bigger ellipse there for sort of the shoulder of it. And then it stays pretty much the same. If you want to think of that sort of Michelin Man, remember the ads with the tire guy, and I'm looking and I'm getting off center. So I'm going to just shift that because it's still easy to keep erasing it. And then I see it gets smaller, so I'm going to come down here and make it get smaller, and then it gets whatever the base is, the bottom, I should say, of the vase before it has a base. So I'll put that slightly larger base on the bottom. So at this point I have what looks like a stick with a bunch of sort of orbits or ellipses going around it. So what I would do now is I'd look back and I'd say, okay, have I kept this sort of balanced? Does it look like the approximate dimensions of that? And then I'm going to go to the top. So I would have done this with a light pencil. Now is when I would grab my darker pencil. So I'm going to push a little bit harder. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, there's that lip. And I see it has a little bit of comes in just a little bit. And then there's a big shoulder on that vase, so it really jumps out. And then it comes in. And it keeps sort of going. When it gets to the bottom, I can see that it has that, that foot or base on it. So at this point I'd look and I'd say, does this look like it? I'm looking at the vase and I'd probably make some changes. I'd probably round that a little bit more. I'd let this taper just slightly. So you can see those subtle changes I made. But then I'd say, okay, I'm pretty happy with this. Pick up your eraser, clean it up, keep those lines you want. Once again, one of the things I'll say a lot is just don't stress this. These are sketches. You're just setting in what would be the starting point of a design or a drawing. So that might be my basic starting point for that shape. And then I could look next to it. So I happen to have that slightly shorter but much wider glass vase. So I look and I can say, okay, and I'll put the glass vase. So it's a little bit, glass vase actually tapers. So I'm going to put that, oops, I forgot to put my line first. So I have kept those balanced. I go to the bottom. And the bottom, I can go right through the shape I have. It's sitting slightly behind it. And I look and that's not balanced, so I bring it over more. And this shape is not as complicated as the other one. So once again, I can come through, locate the lines I want. It has a lip as well. Oops. And it's glass. So when I clean it up, I won't take all, since you'll be able to see through to that back line. I can erase some of it so it's a little lighter. That might be what those two shapes would look like sitting there. And then let's just say I want to put that third shape, smaller, real basic cylindrical shape, and I want it to overlap. So we have this one here overlapping. That tells me about space. And I'm going to put one down here that is off center. Bring it in the front. I won't crop it off the bottom. Cropping something on the bottom, meaning letting it, if you remember that term, if it goes off the page, cropping on the bottom tends to destabilize, tends to make something not feel comfortable. Think about taking photos. You're out taking photos of your friends. You tend not to cut them off, at the knee or right below the knee because it looks odd in the photos. So we try to, I'm going to have this almost tangent where the base will be. So again, I look at the top. I see that oval shape. This one has a lid, but it's exactly the same size. There's no variation on this one at all. So I'm just going to pull that. Darken those lines that I want. And erase a lot. So you're working on pretty decent white paper, which means you can erase. I probably, when I knew I was doing multiple objects, I probably would have kept all these lines relatively light until the very end when I had all the shapes in place. So at this point, I'm going to pick up my, let's go for a 4B. So a little bit darker even. I'm just going to strengthen some lines. So there's that back of the table edge. You can't see because it's off camera, but the light is coming from, oops, the light is coming from the right, so I could strengthen some lines if I wanted. I could keep working on this, but for now, I'm just gonna do a little bit of that. I could keep cleaning this up. An eraser is not a bad thing, it's just another tool. So it's not like it's getting rid of mistakes, it's just helping you to clarify what you want in your drawing. So if I clean this up, there we go. I would have my basic thumbnail sketch again. So I've got 3 objects in a thumbnail sketch. I used that center axis to help balance and align those symmetrical human-made objects. And I maintained my viewing angle in that approximate angle of my, that I was looking down, that 40 or 45 degrees. I see that being repeated through all of the shapes. When I look at this, actually, I probably need to, that one probably needs to open up more. So the nice thing about drawing is you're constantly, I mean, it's iterative. You can look and make changes. It's not like because I put a line down, I can't change something. So that bottom line bothered me because it was a little flat. Now I think that's a little bit better. Okay, so there's your basic thumbnail contour line sketch of multiple objects from observation using a center axis line to help align those ellipses on sort of symmetrical human-made shapes.